And now, if I'm not mistaken, let's see what we have on the line here. T-Boz, are you with us?
I am here, Mr. Williams. Thank you for having me on again.
It's always a pleasure. Each and every week we look forward to hearing from you and your presentation, Words of Wisdom and Moments of Meditation. We are all uplifted and edified by your words of encouragement and how we can improve not only our lives, but the lives of our neighbors.
And that is our mission statement, Jock. And I know I do this every week, but thank you so much for the opportunity that you gave me now 3.5 years ago to be able to bring my thoughts and ideas to your audience. And the audience has grown, and we appreciate that. And so with that, I want to say good morning, everyone, and everyone is coming in. There's plenty of seats up front. George, thank you. There are no pens and papers today, boys and girls. We're going to do something a little different in our opening and then getting into the body of the work. So, yes, there's plenty of room. There's plenty of room. And, George, if people need anything, you'll be happy to help them. Okay, if anyone needs anything, thank you. See, George. Stan has offered to yield his portion of the program. Good morning, Stan. But there are refreshments there. And I will mention our sponsor is Second Home up in Winstead. They have some nice music up there tonight. But I'm going to start the show a little differently, and I mentioned this to Jock off the air. Our hearts are heavy, and our show, our program, I should say, last week and this week is Compassion Part 2. Last week we did Compassion, reaching out to the community at large. And we're going to kind of start off with that again and then lead into compassion in our families, in ourselves. We're going to talk about self-compassion. And then we're going to end with a biblical story, the prodigal son. But like I did last week, I'm going to contemporize it so it'll be more relative to those of you in the classroom listening on the radio and Zoom. Our hearts are heavy because of what's happening or what has happened down in Georgia, Tennessee, Florida, North Carolina. And we're going to start with a quote by a gentleman named Andrew Boyd. And he says, compassion hurts when you feel connected to everything. And so that is how we're going to start off today. And thank you, George. And the reason why I want to start off with that quote is because it really shares how we feel. Okay? Compassion hurts, and it does, when you feel connected to everything. And so what's happened down in the South is we're hurting because we feel connected to those people who are suffering with what's happened in the workplace and in their homes and in their lives and in their parishes and all the things that they have to deal with down there, the lack of food, the lack of water, the lack of medicine. And so we all stand beside them emotionally, but we don't know what to do physically. We are attracted, especially to the story about the little boy who wanted to be a superhero for Halloween. And what happens is he ends up dying, calling for Jesus. Excuse me, folks. I have to do something very quickly. I'll be right back, Jock. Excuse me.
And ladies and gentlemen, we're just taking a brief pause as we bring to you our weekly segment, Words of Wisdom and Moments of Meditation with T-Boz.
Okay, I'm back. Sorry about that, everyone. But I have another an Alexa upstairs as I'm preparing for the show so I could stay on track with Jock. And inadvertently, I had not turned it off as I was preparing downstairs for the show. So my apology. So we're drawn to the story of the little boy who wanted to be a superhero. And we heard the story. I'm sure all of you have seen it. It was brought to my attention by my brother and his wife, and how trapped as his mother was, she couldn't save him. And so he cries out for the name of Jesus. Now, where you are religiously and spiritually, I don't know, but it's irrelevant. He cries out for the name of Jesus. He stops calling for his mother because he knows that the inevitable is going to happen, and he wants to go into the Savior's arms for peace, for life, eternal life. And when we hear these kinds of things, our hearts are wrenched. Like Boyd says, we feel connected to everything. And so a lot of us in this room, we have grandchildren, we have children, we have nieces, we have nephews, and we say, how can these things happen? How can this mother endure this pain? How can this child have such faith that he reaches out for God to save his life in the midst of this terrible tragedy? And so we stand there with our mouths open and our hearts broken because we feel connected. We feel connected, so compassion hurts. And so we say, how do we deal with these things? I don't have the answers. I really don't, because I'm aghast at these things as well. But what we do have is each other. And my advice or my suggestion for all of you, first of all, if you want to send money, be careful to who you send it to. That's number one. But number two, if you have a grandson, a granddaughter, a son, more importantly, your own sons and daughters, before you reach out to the grandchildren, you've been blessed with children of your own. If you have these children, if you have people in your life that maybe you haven't spoken to in a while, hug them, love them, care for them. That's what this little boy that passed away would want from you. He would want you, though you can't bring him back. You can't take away the pain that his mother has. Hopefully she has family down there to help her with this awful tragedy. But we, as committed citizens to each other, we learned last week, Mother Teresa said we belong to each other. That's exactly what Boyd is talking about. And so in the midst of this tragedy, hug the people that you have. Love the people that you're with. So that this way, this boy's life is not in vain. That's the way you can show compassion to this family. That's the way you can show compassion to this event. We feel helpless when these things happen. I know I do. I know there's people in the room here nodding their heads as well. They feel totally helpless. But the way to feel like you're helping the people is love the people you're with. And we're going to talk a lot about that today as we enter into the body of the work. And my show is not really always about current events, but I could not leave this idly on the table, and it falls into our topic for the program today. And I know it's hanging heavy on your hearts. So as we enter into the body of the work, we start with Luke chapter 10, verse 37. And it says, go and do likewise. The Bible always tells us, boys and girls, to go. It doesn't tell us to stay. So what Luke is referring to here, what Jesus says is, I've given you compassion. I've given you love. I've given you care. Go and do likewise. Just don't hold the gift of compassion to yourself. Go and do likewise. And how do we do that? Well, we look at what the Dalai Lama says, and he says, if you want to make others happy, show compassion. If you want to make yourself happy, show compassion. So compassion is the tool, is the catalyst of how we can extend happiness to others. Happiness just doesn't come with material things. Happiness comes through the love and the connectivity, as Boyd says, and Mother Teresa says, the connectivity of each other. So if you want to be happy, if you want to make other people happy, be compassionate. Some of us say, well, I can't do things for AmeriCares, and I can't do things, for all these organizations that want help. I can't do those kinds of things. I don't have time for those kinds of things. Well, show compassion inward to the family that you have. Charity begins at home. And we're going to talk about that in depth. One of my favorite speakers, the late Helen Keller, says, life is an exciting business, and most exciting when lived for others. There's the other O word we don't like. We like the word ourselves, but others. Wow, isn't that an interesting concept? We talked about that last week because I'm part of the me generation. Living our lives, there's one O word, our lives for others. That's what true compassion is. Taking the gifts, the talents, the resources that we have, and not just living our lives for ourselves, but for others. Others, like we said last week, who maybe don't look like us and talk like us. But that's what compassion is. Luke, go and do likewise. Go. Don't hold the compassion that God has given you. If you're an atheist or agnostic or Islamic, whatever you are, you're welcome to the show. You could call this higher authority Andy Hardy, if you will. It doesn't matter. But take that advice and use it. Forget if it comes from Luke. Go and do likewise. Our lives are not meant to be held in a box, to be held to ourselves. Ephesians chapter 4, verse 32 says, be kind to one another, forgiving one another, as God has forgiven you. Now, I'm not going to go long on this because we talked a lot about forgiveness over the winter. But forgiveness is not excusing people of the damage that they've done to you or the hurt they caused. It's you letting go of the anger and the hate that you have toward them. So forgiveness does not excuse bad behavior. So we talked a lot about that over the winter, but part of compassion and inward is forgiving. So if you have a father you haven't talked to in a while, if you have a brother, a sister, or someone in your family and they've hurt you in some way or said something wrong to you, you need to forgive them. Now, if you can repair that relationship compassionately, that's fine. But if you can't forgive them and move forward with your life instead of carrying all that guilt with you. The Mafi Shatter says this, all I ever wanted was to reach out and not just with my hands, but with my heart and help someone. Boom. All he wanted to do was not just with his hands, which a lot of us have done, but with our hearts. But what blocks our hearts is our prejudices. And not just prejudices for race and religion and those things, but our prejudices against the son who might be gay, the daughter who might be transgender, the grandson who might struggle with alcoholism, the neighbor's son who might have gambling problems. See, those prejudices block us. We're going to come to a great quote pretty soon. They block us for compassion because we feel they're not worthy of our compassion because they don't occupy the same mindset that we do. They're not heterosexual. They're not Republican. They're not Democrat. They're not independent. That's not compassion. Go and do likewise. Jesus hung on a cross and bled to death for 6 hours while we were still bums. Boom. And if there was only one of us on the face of the earth at that time, he would have went through that same hell. He didn't pre-qualify us for his crucifixion. He died because we had inequities. So reach out with your heart. See people, we're going to see in a minute, for who they are. We look down at the next quote, which is Luke, and he says, lend expecting nothing in return. Boom. And lend doesn't only mean money. It means compassion with your time. Lend without expecting anything in return. How many of us say, well, we'll help you out. You've proven yourself. You show me what you're made of and I'll ante up the rest. That's wrong. That's wrong. We love, like a mother loves a child in a womb before the baby's born, before the baby gives the mother a birthday card, a Mother's Day card, a rose, whatever it is. That mother loves that child moving in her body. The child hasn't done anything. So Luke tells us to lend, expecting nothing in return. That's true compassion. I told the story about my friend Jim, and it works perfect now. When he was with a company down in Southington, he loaned someone money for rent. And it was many years later, the person showed up. I forget exactly how they met again. I think maybe at a trade show. And the person paid Jim back. This was years later. Jim helped that person, expecting never to see that money again. But he did. And that is true compassion. So just think how wonderful the person was able to get out of a financial jam. And then just think how wonderful the person was to be able to repay Jim back. And the reason why he paid Jim back, because Jim never held the debt over his head. Where are we? It's 11:30, Jock. Why don't we go to the sponsors, and we'll keep rolling along.
Thank you so much, T-Boz. We appreciate it. And we want to encourage each and every one of you to take the opportunity, especially on our local and live Thursday edition of the Feel Good Show, to participate in giving us information on the things that you're doing in the community and those things that you want the community to know about. We take great pride in the fact that we are a community local community radio station, and we can have no community without you in it. So we thank our sponsors for allowing us to bring you the quality community radio programming that you're witnessing at this time. And again, we want to encourage you to take advantage of becoming a part of your community radio. And with that being said, we will turn the floor back over to T-Boz for more words of wisdom and moments of meditation.
Thank you, Jock. And again, sorry about the little mishap before. This is an anonymous quote. It says, "There is no exercise better for the heart than to reach down and lift someone up." Boom. Right back to what the Dalai Lama says about compassion. Right back to what Luke says, go and do likewise. Chapter 10, verse 37. There's nothing better than to reach down and lift someone up for the heart. If you really want to feel good, find someone in your family. Find that niece that maybe you can mentor as she's going to college. Find that grandson. My friend Keith talked about his grandson. He's a tremendous ball player. And his grandfather is there not only watching the game like a grandfather as a social exercise, but he's mentoring his grandson. He mentored his son as well. His son Derek played baseball. And so he's mentoring his grandson. He's encouraging him. What his grandson will remember years after Keith and Darlene go to heaven is not only that Grandpa was in the stands, but Grandpa cared. Grandpa took his time, and Grandpa's legally blind like me. But he's there for this child, lifting him up, encouraging him. There is no better exercise than when you show that kind of compassion. And Grandpa's there when the kid hits a home run and when he doesn't. And what's amazing about this young man, he's 10 years old playing in a 12-year-old league. So he's been given the God-given talent from his father, who was grandfather to him. But Keith shows this child, and he lifts him up. Luke chapter 6, verse 35. Here's one no one's going to like. Love your enemies. Oh. Now, let's decipher that one for a minute. Loving your enemies does not mean in the romantic way of loving your enemies, the way you love your spouses or your children. Loving your enemies means you don't wish ill on them. You could have enemies within your home, within your family. But just because you love your enemies does not mean you have to like them. Boom. If someone is toxic in your life, if someone has hurt you deeply and you've forgiven them, but you cannot repair, maybe with counseling or your own efforts, you can love them from a distance, hoping that they don't have any problems or illness or things like that. But you don't have to like them. You can separate yourself from them. That's also a form of compassion for yourself. We're going to talk about that in a minute. So a lot of people mix that up with Luke. Love your enemies. Love them, but you don't have to like them. And people get very confused with all of that. I'm trying to make it simple for you. Loving them is not in the romantic way, not even in the brotherly sister, mother, father way. It's loving them so that bad things don't happen. But on the same token, if they're not supposed to be in your life, if they've caused you emotional, physical pain, then leave them out of your life. We look at Jack John, and he says, sometimes it takes one act of kindness and compassion to change a person's life. Boom. And that happened to my friend Mary Cashman. She was over at the Berkshire Pizza Place, and they're a great business here in Torrington, but they only take cash. They do not use plastic. And Mary was over there ordering a pizza, and then she went to get her debit card, and the person said, no, we don't take debit cards. And so she's 84 years old. She had a bad knee. She just had that knee replaced, but she was limping a lot then, and she was standing there, and she was befuddled and said, well, I'll go home. I'll get cash, keep the pizza here, then I'll come back and pay for it and all of that. And there was a gentleman sitting at the end of the bar, and he said to Mary, how much is the pizza? She said, $20. He gave the guy $20 cash, and he said, ma'am, take your pizza home and enjoy it. This is a random act of kindness. This is someone that Mary didn't know. But he, in the big church, and I talk about this all the time, not the little church, the big church is what we're going to be judged on. He, in the big church, saw a need. He saw an act of compassion for a person he didn't know, lend without expecting nothing in return, go and do likewise. We don't even know if this gentleman was, quote unquote, a Christian. He could have been anybody, it doesn't matter. But his heart, what did it just say? I want to be able to touch people's lives, not only with my hands, but my heart. His heart was moved with compassion to help my friend Mary out. That's what we're talking about here. Inward, in other words, family, and then a little bit outward, like we talked last week, when we see our neighbors. Who is our brother? Everyone is our brother. Everyone. Love one another. It doesn't say love the people you like. Love one another as I have loved you. Do a research on who the 12 apostles were. They were really a bunch of misfits, but that changed over time. Dietrich Bonhoeffer says, I love this one, we must learn to regard people less in the light of what they do and more in the light of their suffering. Bing, bang, say it with me, boom. More in the light of the suffering. Exactly what I said earlier. We look at people in the light of, oh, they vote this way. Oh, they vote that way. Oh, my grandson wants to be a granddaughter. Oh, my nephew is homosexual. Oh, doesn't know how to save money. Oh, they bought a house in Alaska. On and on and on and on it goes. But we have to look at their suffering. That homosexual nephew that you have, we just lost my cousin who was homosexual. He died of pancreatic cancer. It was more important that we showed compassion and care to his cancer than worry about his homosexuality. But we judge people. We look at them. The cost of our compassion is if they meet our expectations. That's not compassion. That's judgment. That's criticizing. What Dietrich says here is to look not at what the people do, but at their suffering. So if you have family members in your family or a neighbor that doesn't think and talk and walk and dress and look like you, so what? Look beyond. Look at them as a human being and see what they may be suffering with and reach out with what you can. Sometimes a cup of coffee. You don't always have to hang banners. A cup of coffee, a phone call, invite him over for dinner. Steve Maraboli says this, I found the best way to love someone is not to turn them into someone you want them to be, but instead help them to be the very best version of, here's a word, themselves. Not yourself, themselves. And it really, it bothers me when people try to evangelize other people and they're hitting them over the head with the Bible because they're trying to teach them their way. It's not. It's lifting people up to be the very best themselves. Each and every one of us is a unique creation by God. We have gifts and talents unique to all of us. I've said this many times on the show. There is no two people in the entire world that have the same fingerprints, even identical twins, and I'm an identical twin. We do not have the same fingerprints. So as unique as the fingerprints are, so are you. So are you, and so are you. So true compassion is not telling that grandson, you should do this, you should go to trade school, you should go to college, you should get a job. True compassion is lifting with our heart is helping people be the best version of themselves. Jeremiah says, I have a plan for you to prosper. I knew you when I created you in the womb. Before you told that nephew what to do, God already put the gifts and the talents in him, in her, in them. Our job then is to see that and cultivate it. That's compassion. That's compassion. Compassion doesn't always mean running to the Salvation Army with used clothes. Compassion means listening to the people in your family. Listening without saying something. Without saying something. This is a great quote, John Joseph Powell, and he says, it is absolutely human certainty that no one can know their own beauty. Boo. 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 People do not see their own beauty. Wow. Isn't that amazing? What low self-esteem, poor self-image does to us. Our vocation then, in all of us, is to help people see with compassion their own beauty. I have talks with people all the time about their beauty. And they say, I didn't know that. I didn't know I made that much of an impression on you. Just what Steve Maraboli said. Making people see the best that they are, the best version of themselves. Go and do likewise. So your mission this week when you go out to be compassionate, show the people their own beauty. How do you show the people in North Carolina their beauty? How do you show that mother that lost that child her beauty? You love your family members that you have. Cancel your plans this week and go visit that grandson. Cancel your plans this week and go visit that son. Turn off the cell phone Sunday and sit with your daughter who you haven't talked to in a while. That's compassion. That's compassion. Go and do likewise. Self-compassion. What is self-compassion? Self-compassion is the motivation to define and acknowledge your own pain and suffering, and through hard work and motivation, lift yourself from that. Now, I believe in that, but you also need people to help you as well. I got through a bunch of things, and if it wasn't for some of the people in this room listening on the air and Zoom, Jock Williams and a bunch of other people, I wouldn't be where I am, okay? But self-compassion is good, too. Self-compassion is self-talk. Too many of us just beat ourselves up with the least compassion to ourselves. We judge ourselves. We look in the mirror and we see all the cracks and dents, and we don't see what? Our own beauty. We don't see our own beauty because we're too busy looking at the bumps and scrapes of life. But self-compassion is tell yourself the good gifts that you have. Talk to people who edify you, who lift you up, who help you see the best version of yourself, who, as the Dalai Lama says, not about ourselves, but others. Get with the right people. If you have people saying shoulda, woulda, coulda, and if I was you, I would have done this, then you could just politely not have them in your life anymore. So self-compassion is good. You got to keep telling yourself, you all have gifts and talents. You're all special. Like I said about the fingerprints. Otherwise, what do we say at the end of the show? Be yourself. Everyone else was taken. If you wanted to be her, then you would have been her, and she would have been you, and he would have been the guy in the back of the room. But you're all different. We learned that last week from Roy T. Bennett. Lady Diana says it all the time. It's a real eye-opener for me. So self-compassion and be honest with yourself. Recognize the talents that you have, the gifts that you have. You all have them. You may not have the one that Jim has. You may not have the gift that Stan has. You may not have the gift that George has. Doesn't matter. They don't have your gifts. We look at compassion phrases. Here's some things you could say to people when they're going through tough times or in the corner. I can see why you are so disappointed. Instead of saying, don't worry about it. Better days are coming. right? That's what we all say. I can see why you're so disappointed. You know, they say in sales, there's a great line that says, feel, felt, found. I know how you feel. I felt the same way, but this is what I found. Boom, it diffuses all the objection. So this phrase right here, I can see why you're disappointed. You're showing empathy. Why do you think there's wars and you have all the problems that we have? Because there's no empathy anymore. People are just out for themselves. Okay? Well, here's another phrase. This must be very difficult for you. Instead of saying, don't worry about it. It's nothing. She'll come back. He'll come back. The dog you'll find him someday. That's all prejudgment. This must be very difficult for you. Ooh. You know what that means to someone who's going through issues or suffering? Here's one. You don't have to explain. Boom. Don't have to explain. Too many of us people are suffering, and what do? We don't listen. We don't show compassion. What we do is we jump right in and cut their sentences off. You don't have to explain and just sit there. I talked about the guy who worked for our company years ago when my wife died. The only thing he could say in English was hi and bye. He came here one night with 2 cups of coffee. We sat on the porch. We looked at that bird bath at the back of the farm. Didn't say one word to each other. At the end, he got up, he shook my hand and said, Lo siento, which means I'm sorry. That's compassion. He never said anything. He never offered advice. He couldn't. But his presence of himself, taking the time to sit with me when I lost my wife, was compassion. Too many of us think we've got to build these bridges. We got to put up these edifices to show compassion. No. Holding a hand, rubbing a back, sitting, listening, not prejudging, not asking people, well, you know, if you show me what you're made of, then I'll be there for you. That's ludicrous. I'm here to listen. We just talked about that. What can I do to help? Show up at your kids' games. Show up when your friend lost his wife or husband. Show up. That's compassion. Show up. Put some of yourself to the side, ourselves, and make time for others in their time of need. And I'm sure all of us in this room have done that, but sometimes we need to tweak it a little bit. Let's get into our biblical story of the prodigal son. We'll make this quick because we got to get to the song. And everyone knows the prodigal son, but we're going to make it a little bit different. And every one of us has been in all 3 of these positions. There's the son who takes the money and splits. There's the father who welcomes him back. And then there's the brother. All right? So the son, right? His father's got a delicatessen. He's Bozzy's Deli. He's got 10 of them all throughout Litchfield. So he says to his son, here's some money. You know, do something good with it. What does he do? He takes off to California. He's wine, women, and song. He's out there having a blast at the discotheque. All of a sudden, he realizes he's broke, and he's sitting in a homeless shelter, and he's eating Roman noodles. And he said to himself, how did I get here? How did I get here? He didn't appreciate it. And so then the father waiting for him. So finally, the guy is out there in California. He said, I got to go back home. I don't know if my father will take me back, but I got to humble myself and ask for forgiveness. I got to ask him to take me home because I blew all the money. So he goes walking back, you know, he gets in the car, comes down I-95, takes Route 8 back to Torrington, right? He gets up here, and there's the father waiting for him. And what does the father do? He says, no sweat. Here's a Rolex watch. You know, here's the keys to the new Corvette. You're back in the family. And then you got the brother Mark. He's like, Pop, what's going on? What's going on? He took the money and took off, right? He took the money, took off, blew it. And here you are giving him a car and all this other stuff. And I've been working in this deli slicing salami for the last 8 months while he was gone. And you never gave me anything. That's compassion, right? And the father says to the other son, but this son I thought was lost and has returned. You I've always had with me all the time. So haven't we all been all 3 of those guys? Haven't we done something, maybe it wasn't money, but we squandered something that our parents gave us, love, compassion, help? And then we've all been the parents who welcome them home, and then we've all been the other brother going, what's up, Dad? This doesn't make any sense. I'm your go-to guy. But My brother Lenny's getting all the stuff. The father shows real compassion. Him, I thought I lost. You, I've had, and I've appreciated you. And you have half of my inheritance as well. We've all been all three of those people. I know I have. I've been the father, I've been the son, I've been the brother. So we come back to the hurricane and compassion. We come back to the starting story. We come back to Brady's quote about being connected to everything. What do we do now that we have all this information? Do we just leave it in the classroom and go out? No. We take this information, we put it in our hearts, and we try our best to love the people we're with, forgive the people we're with, understand the people we're with, see the something the people we're with, and hopefully that vibe will go and find its way where it should. And somehow, I don't know, but this mother will someday have peace in her heart. And this boy I know is in heaven with God. So take this information, take all of it, and do something with it. Go and do likewise. Take this week to reach out to someone in your family and show real compassion. And that's how you can help that mother. Our takeaway quote is by Anne Frank, and it says, "No one has ever become poor by giving." Boom. Give, boys and girls. Give with your hearts. Give your resources. Give with your time. Give, and you'll be wealthy. Pray for the people that persecute you. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will inherit the earth. Pray for these people that they get the help they need. And if you can do something locally to these people, do it. Make a pledge. Do something. And go and do likewise. Be yourself. Be your compassionate self. Because everyone else is taken. Jock, why don't you play the beautiful song that we selected? I thank you, everyone. Again, I apologize about the snafu in the beginning of the program. It's live. And please have compassion for me. I pray for all of you and pray for me. And we'll be back next week. Jock, spin the vinyl.